Pelicans and Suns. I'm not sure anyone would have predicted the Pelicans would be here. No Zion, started the season 3-16. Kudos to them they got a little bit lucky in the sense that they did get to go up against this Clippers team without Paul George and then still almost blew their lead. What do you make of this series, though? It's almost, I struggle to make a case for Atlanta against Miami. I don't really have a case for New Orleans against Phoenix.
I have no case. I have no case at all. Like this New Orleans team, super fun. Kudos to them for making it through the play-in tournament. I'm really glad that 6 seasons in, Brandon Ingram gets to experience true postseason basketball. Jose Alvarado is an absolute joy to watch. Just the energy with which he plays is an example to every young player out there who's trying to make a roster, trying to carve out a bigger role. Herb Jones, like if you're not watching him when he plays defense, you're missing out on opportunities to learn things. Trey Murphy III, the gumption he's shown in big moments is huge. CJ McCollum, so smooth when he's rolling on offense. This whole team is really, really fun to watch and is dangerous. But the Suns are a perfect basketball team, or as close as you can come to being a perfect basketball team with a salary cap in place. I don't know what their weakness is, and I'll spoil everything right now by saying that they're like my unquestioned title pick. It's going to take big time injuries to shift them off that course.
That's not spicy when I picked them in the preseason. Just an FYI.
I'm not trying to be spicy. I'm just saying, like, I'm going to spoil my answer here.
Oh,
they're looking pretty good right now with no Luka. That's what's going to happen. This is going to be the true asterisk title. Utah's going to win because every star is going to get hurt.
I was actually thinking, what the hell? Everyone's wondering what's going to happen in Utah regardless. What happens in Utah if Luka doesn't play and they still lose this series? So the Pelicans with Zion are going to be terrifying if they can get through next season. I don't like the way that they match up against Phoenix.
It's pretty clear too that he's not playing this postseason, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know that he wants to and that the Pelicans don't want him to. And I think it's a good thing that he wants to play. I also don't think it's a bad thing that the Pelicans aren't letting him play. I do think that they've probably given him more carte blanche than they should within the organization, it sounds like, or at least his family or his representatives, whoever they are. But they're prioritizing the long-term future. And there's, when you look at Zion, he's just, I don't want to boil him down to just saying he's a specimen, but he's a human anomaly. And there could be a concern that his prime is going to be shorter than normal anyway. So we're not going to risk any injury when he's actually like injured. If we don't think he's 100% or we just don't want him ramping it up in fucking mid-April. And so I totally understand both ways. He would obviously be a big help in any series. I just don't look. I do think New Orleans can do some interesting things against the Suns when they're on offense, just looking at what CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram can do. But Phoenix has like the defenders to really get after them and doesn't have to go to the extremes that the Clippers did at going after Ingram and McCollum. But they also could, because as we just saw, like you either need Trey Murphy III, who came in and played some big minutes, or you're going to need Jose Alvarado to hit more of his threes. Like you need more of your supporting cast to make these teams pay if they're going to play Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum aggressively. But again, if you just look at the Suns personnel, they can play straight up if they want to, or with simple switching. The other thing that I thought about was, okay, what if New Orleans just went to the downsized look where they've gone from playing?
I think that's a disaster.
But okay, well, you're stealing words out of my mouth now. Is Jackson Hayes, Jonas Valanciunas, I don't like the look of them together, even though the Pelicans have gotten like some minutes out of them. It made sense against the Clippers because the Clippers forced the hand and Larry Nance Jr. is playing so well. But Phoenix has just destroyed the Clippers themselves when they downsized. And so you're playing into that. I do think Larry Nance Jr. at the 5 is different from having, is it Robert Covington or Marcus Morris Sr. or Batum, whoever you want to consider it. I do think that's different. And if things aren't going well, I could see them trying that. But like DeAndre Ayton just doesn't move like a conventional big. So I don't know that even works. So again, I could see the Pelicans putting up actual points on the Suns, but I also don't know how they're going to be built to defend Phoenix. Your best chance to defend Phoenix might actually be going small, because I don't know what the Jackson Hayes, Valanciunas front court gives you on defense there. Maybe Hayes' athleticism, just him straight up, like him going up against Ayton, that's something you want to see. So I just struggle to see. I would like to see is what I'm getting at. I want to see New Orleans get weird in this series. We've already seen that like they prefer Jose Alvarado over Devontae Graham. And I don't think that they should be afraid to try some of the quirkier stuff. Like, look, Larry Nance Jr. is under contract for next season. Why don't you see what happens if you're going to match him straight up against Ayton? So, or at least like, can we go to Jackson Hayes, Larry Nance Jr., a little something like that? Just let's get a little bit weird.
I agree about getting weird. I'm terrified of downsizing in this series, though, because there is not a point guard in NBA history who has been better at getting the ball to big men than Chris Paul. And DeAndre Ayton, when he is the true big man on the floor, he looks like David Robinson out there sometimes. Like, he is so good at capitalizing on a size advantage. And that pair together against a young Pelicans team, foul trouble out the wazoo. I don't see any solution to guarding without one big on the floor. So if you want it to be Jackson Hayes and then you pair him with Larry Nance, sure, like go for that. Like, as you said, let's get weird. But I don't think going like truly small against this Phoenix team is a recipe for anything other than obliteration.
Yeah, I guess I just don't. And look, the numbers offensively with Jackson Hayes and Jonas Valanciunas have been great. And New Orleans is like +5 per 100 possessions with those two. I don't like. You say downsizing to Larry Nance could be a disaster. I like their chances defensively. If it's like Larry Nance, Trey Murphy III, Herb Jones, McCollum, and Ingram go without a point guard.
You still have a good bit of length there, but that's the
alternative.
That's a 30-15 game for Aiden waiting to happen.
Okay, but what is so different? So you just trust Jackson Hayes to defend DeAndre Ayton that much more than Larry Nance Jr. is what?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you're guarding him well regardless in this series, but I do think that like the chaos that Hayes can bring means that there might be more disruptive plays and just the size. Aiden does not capitalize against bigger players like he does against smaller ones. I think that much is undeniable based on what he's done throughout the season.
I guess you might be just higher on Jackson Hayes than I am, or also higher.
Oh, I'm definitely not
on defense than I am.
I am higher on Jackson Hayes' size.
Do we just get into X factors here? Like, I don't even.
What? Yeah. This is one of those like where the talent disparity is so wide. New Orleans is fun and scrappy and has interesting pieces, but like, who are the 5 best players in this series?
Devin Booker, Chris Paul. I think probably McCollum and Ingram are both in the top 5.
You would have them both above Bridges and Ayton?
I would not both, but Ayton or Bridges would be the other one. I'd probably lean towards. I still think Mikal Bridges is more valuable to the Suns than DeAndre Ayton. So
I do too.
Throw him in there. If you wanted to say that, I mean, Ingram has to be in there when you're looking at what the choices are. And McCollum's been great for New Orleans on offense. He gives you someone to attack on defense. Clearly, the Clippers did a good job of that. So, I mean,
and then we still haven't even mentioned Cameron Johnson and Jay Crowder.
But like, those are not. They to me, I think it's arguable that the Pelicans have 2 of the top 5 players in this series. I just don't know that's the proper argument for disparity. Now, if you go in, who's the Pelicans' 3rd best player versus the Suns' 3rd best player?
Well, that's where I was going with it.
Yeah, that's the talent gap there is absurd. And I'm just like, what happens to Ingram and McCollum are like all of a sudden? I mean, I guess the Clippers, they run so much extreme stuff and they have a bunch of great defenders on there, but now you're going up against the Suns team that has Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges. And like, if you get by people like DeAndre Ayton is still just going to be right there. And look, by the way, if you downsize against the Suns and they decide maybe Ayton's taking a breather and they don't want to play JaVale McGee, like they just have Torrey Craig sitting there. And that's Torrey Craig who hits threes whenever he puts on the Suns jersey. Like, he's just going to shoot 1,000,000,000% from 3. So I
stand by Phoenix basically being a perfect team.
So my concerns with Phoenix would be, we should probably get into it might be more valuable to get in their overarching title stock. I do wonder if like the absence of rim pressure could hurt them a little bit. I think they're better set up to do that based off what we've seen from Ayton during that stretch without Chris Paul. They do have JaVale McGee as like sort of that athletic rim runner. And you will never get me just looking at like how offenses relied on a Kawhi and a Paul George when they were healthy and it was fine. I can't get up in arms about, oh, they don't get to the rim enough, or I'd like to see them get to the foul line more. I think what might be the bigger concern, and this is just like splitting hairs, they were 14th in defensive rebounding rate this year. We did see last year against the Bucks, they gave up, it was 30 plus points in transition and second chance points opportunities per game during the finals. That's a lot, but they have JaVale McGee now. I'm not saying he would have made the difference in that finals thing, but it's like you know, Dario Saric, even if he was healthy for I think he only played like 3 minutes in that series or something ridiculous. Like he wouldn't have done much there. So they are as close to basketball infallibility as we have right now in the league. I do think a healthy Warriors team is built to disrupt their offense a lot more than I think people have been talking about. But even then, it's like Golden State's sort of shot creation deficit outside of Steph and Jordan Poole does make things a little touch and go there. So look, I picked Phoenix to win the title of the preseason. I would not walk that back. I'm going to pose this to you right now, though. Over under of, I'm going to say 3.5 games that the Suns lose to get out of the West. Are you taking the over or the under?
Oh, I think this is a sweep. So, wow. I'm going to take the under.
That's gutsy because but then again, if they're going to win this series, I'm going to
I look up and down the standings and I fail to see who matches up well with this team because with Steph hobbled, I don't think Golden State gets past Denver.
Can we wait to see Steph play before we just assume that he's like he's come back from injuries before?
But if we're specifically saying that he's not even going to play 30 minutes in game one, then he's hobbled.
That could just be more of like a conditioning issue.
Or maybe it's gamesmanship.
That could be it too. So I don't know if I would take the under. That was my own one. I don't have to make a pick. I'd probably take the under still because you're going to go up against either the Mavericks or the Jazz in round 2. And like neither of those teams is going to.
That could be a sweep also.
So yeah, I'll take the under on that too. I'll take the under. Let's just go with that high on Phoenix, apparently. Who's your X factor for the Pelicans in this series?
Adam Silver. Like maybe he rigs it in their favor.
Is Zion just coming back?
Right. Something like that. No, I mean, it's hard to pick an X factor for either of these because it feels like the most lopsided of the first round series. So like who of the Pelicans could truly put them over the edge? Are we going to say like, if I go with Jose Alvarado here, who probably has like the most variability, like if he's knocking down threes, if he's still playing with that energy and impact, if he's disrupting Chris Paul for the full length of the court and somehow throwing him off his rhythm, is that enough?
It's not enough, but I think that makes the series like exponentially more interesting to where, oh, maybe this goes.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. So if we're approaching it from an interest perspective, not a Pelicans winning the series perspective, then I think Alvarado's the pick.
I'll just go with Trey Murphy III for the sake of variety here. And I also do think we mentioned this at the top of the podcast, the Pelicans need, like CJ McCollum was a perfect fit, but if you're going to go up against teams that can either disrupt or commit so much attention to both he and Brandon Ingram, you need players on your team to make those decisions pay when they're going to be open. I think by playing Trey Murphy III, who at least, should functionally help you on defense relative to your other options that aren't Herb Jones for the most part. If you have him out there and he was the best, he shot 43.8% from deep when he entered the Pelicans rotation for good. And it was like almost 20 games, hit big shots in that playing game. That's something that I think can keep the pressure on the defense. And I'd probably feel differently if it wasn't Phoenix that they were playing, because I just feel like the Suns are built to navigate whatever at this point. That would be my pick though. And maybe he also, having him and Herb Jones, does that inspire you to try out different front court combinations or more no point guard combinations where Devontae Graham isn't playing, Jose Alvarado isn't playing, and you have McCollum and Ingram, and then it's Herb Jones and Trey Murphy the third, then you fill out your five. I would just go with Larry Nance Jr. for the sake of backing up my own argument from before, but going with Jackson Hayes or Valanciunas there. So I don't mean to disrespect the Pelicans here and just assume that they can't get a game. This is more about how high I am on the Suns. And I actually do think when you look at New Orleans' personnel, if you can look at a lot of their transition defense this season, they overachieved on that end of the floor after their 3-16 start, obviously. So I would view this as a very encouraging season from New Orleans, given everything that happened, no Zion, their start. And the fact that they just got, I mean, we don't know how the negotiations went down, but Larry Nance Jr. in the CJ McCollum trade. And then also, by the way, Robert Covington in the Norman Powell trade. Like, these have shades of, Danny Green went to Toronto in the Kawhi Leonard trade. Just incredible that both those teams were able to get two Blazers for the modest prices that they ended up paying for them.
The other thing here that's great for New Orleans is just the experience, because that should not be overlooked. Even if it's just a 4-game sweep and none of the games are particularly competitive, that's super valuable experience for a young team that not all the primary pieces have been here before and is expected to enjoy continuity plus the addition of someone like Zion Williamson next year. I mean, it is a monumental help to guys like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy and Jose Alvarado and Brandon Ingram as well, because he hasn't been on this stage.
It would, and I don't want to make it about the discourse. That's where it comes in, and you miss Zion Williamson, not just because of what he does for your product, but this would have been just to get the experience there. I will also say the New Orleans crowd during that playing game, one of the best New Orleans crowds that I've watched in quite some time. So that'll be fun. And the other thing about New Orleans, I don't want to do the postmortem on their season right now. Like, if you just put, and I know they have Jonas Valanciunas, I know they have Jackson Hayes, I know they have Larry Nance Jr. If you just put like an elite rim protector on this team, the West is incredibly deep, but I would probably be ready to pick them as the top 4 team in the West next season.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm not talking about it needs to be. I'm not saying it needs to be Miles
That's
Turner.
Bold.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Because Phoenix isn't going anywhere. Denver's going to be healthy. The Grizzlies. The Mavericks are always going to be good with Luka. The Warriors are still going to have their core. There's a lot of good teams in the West.
Yeah, we've also seen, though, that there's going to be a lot of hiccups.
The Clippers should have George and Kawhi.
Should. We've been saying that since they signed George and Kawhi, though.
And I'm still saying should.
So, it depends on the quality of room.
It might be the Jazz's year.
You sound like Danny Ainge at his next, if he ever has a part-time CEO or whatever he is there. So, yeah, it's Suns in 4 for me. Yeah. Who's your X factor for the Suns?
Campaign, because I want to see if he can repeat the heroics that we saw during the run through the Western Conference last year, when he just seemingly couldn't miss, got to the rim at will and all that. And if he can provide valuable minutes, or if he's on the floor often enough because these games aren't close, then you're buying rest for Chris Paul and Devin Booker for what is going to be a long playoff run.
Mine's going to be JaVale McGee, just because, if anything, it's like, looking back, they could have probably used him in last year's finals. And if the Pelicans are going to play at least one big all the time, you need someone reliable behind DeAndre Ayton to take those minutes. And he should, against this team, help you on the defensive glass a lot. So, yeah, that's my X factor there.
We're going to have to eat a lot of crow when New Orleans wins.
If New Orleans wins, that's one of the biggest upsets in playoff history, is it not?
Yes. Probably. Maybe would it be the biggest?
I'm trying to think back to where,
like the We Believe Warriors beating the Mavericks, but the Mavericks were not the juggernaut that these Suns are.
Right. I mean, the Suns just had an historically good season. So,
yeah.
Who did the Warriors face in the first round in 2016?
Was it Anthony Davis's Pelicans? Was that the year that he made that like corner 3 with his eyes closed to force overtime in game 1 and they won that one?
It was not, because they beat the Rockets in the first round that year. But
might have been 1 year off.
And yeah, so Houston was the 8 seed that year. I don't know if that would that have counted as the biggest upset in playoff history? They had James Harden and Dwight Howard and Bevs and a 30-year-old.
Probably not. Just because of the talent on that roster.
Yeah, and I guess the Pelicans don't have that. It would be whatever. It'd be one of the biggest upsets in playoff history. I don't think the Pelicans are going anywhere. They're going to get Zion back. And like I said, I don't know if they would be as enthralled. They just went out. They have Jonas Valanciunas. They have Jackson Hayes. So maybe they don't want to go like too, full bore after another big. But I would be all over any. Not Rudy Gobert. Let me make that clear. But like, if Miles Turner is still available in Indiana, I'm not opposed to like, yeah, okay, no one on this roster is going to preclude me, is what I'm getting at, from chasing any other big that I think is the quintessential fit for Zion, CJ, Herb Jones, and Brandon Ingram. You slot just a really good rim protector on that team. Not Mason Plumlee. Charlotte Hornet fans know what I'm talking about. So they're a top 4 team in the West. That would be my recklessly optimistic stance on the Pelicans.
You're not going to back off. I respect it.